questions, and I guess I already asked the question, but how are you guys during this time of
We're
craziness?
okay. We are okay.
Yeah, I would say okay is probably the best grade you can give it. I mean, our lives, luckily, we're kind of in a position where we can still go about our day to day in a relatively normal way because me and Malcolm typically just work on music most of the time anyway. Um, but it's colored by a real mess of the world right now, and so we've got heavy hearts and
Kane,
busy minds about stuff.
Kane, did you just wake up?
No, no,
I've
I
noticed
woke
on these
up.
I've noticed on these Zoom interviews we get a little scragglier and scragglier every time.
True.
Like it's like day 3, haven't washed. You know, we're both wearing the same shirts we wore yesterday.
I'm definitely scraggly right now. But if I was actually surprised you didn't comment and compliment the fact that I woke up at 9 o'clock today and texted the group. Remember?
Oh, I saw it at 10:30.
Well, maybe I texted at 10:30, but I woke up. But it's not. It doesn't really count because I stayed in bed.
I sleep now. I sleep now with my phone on airplane mode, so that because I
bad
know
idea.
what are you talking about, so that
Because
I
then,
don't wake up and immediately check my phone. I'll go read or something first.
oh,
It's so
well,
much better
that's good.
because both you and I are anxious people, and we'll like the first thing we do in the morning is text each other. Okay, this is what we need to get done.
I would just be worried that somebody would be trying to call me to remind me that I'm late somewhere, and I wouldn't get that call.
That seems like a personal worry.
Yeah,
Very unique to your experience.
Yep.
That's actually a good idea. I've done the airplane mode thing, and I think that's a good idea for people with anxiety. Just disappear for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely feeling like the different personalities because like your lighting is like Malcolm's lighting is like he's like in this blank canvas room in heaven, and like Kane is like doing a Starbucks rendition. Yep. I'm just here gonna make coffee and try to live out the day. What can we do?
Oh yeah, I have this room. It's actually probably the behind the scenes would tell you more about our personalities. This room is unfinished and has been unfinished for 6 months. So I come in here to do interviews because it's like the only space I have away from everybody.
It so really does.
That tells you more.
It looks like the opposite of the sunken place. It just looks like a vast, bright, like
welcome
void.
Yeah, I was talking to one artist. I did an interview recently, and he was saying how his label kind of pressures him to, you have to be on social media, you have to post, and the aim is to be inspirational. But sometimes you're like, I don't know, I'm not a guru. I'm just trying to make music. But there is a pressure now you have to be a songwriter, producer, Jesus, and as wise as Christ.
right.
Do you think, as particularly with the pandemic, that artists are going to have to kind of become a jack of all trades? Like, you have to be open.
Well, what it comes from is that now, at least half of the equation, that half of the things that factor into whether or not you really are a follower of somebody, a fan of somebody, and I find myself doing this too, is you kind of fall in love with their personality and identify with them on a personal level, beyond enjoying the movies they've acted in or the records they're making. You kind of like the real fandom has become about a person, their at least their projected personality.
Well, I think because there's so. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think it can be dangerous only because although you're kind of forced into a position as an artist by society nowadays and culture these days, like it divulge so much of your personal information and views on things. I think it also leaves room for people to falsely display who they are and give off a false impression of their stances and their personality traits, and that can be soul crushing to people if they ever discover it's not real.
Well, although there's so much content now, it's almost hard to be, to project that illusion of whoever that person is for that long. You know what I mean? Like, think about people like Cardi B. Why we love her so much is because she's seems very much that way, unapologetically. But someone like Saoirse Ronan,
good example.
You have to be a brand nowadays, and that kind of in reading your story, especially and how you have found inspirations and being in LA. I don't know if you've realized it or not, but in a way, you guys have noted that you do have to be a presentation, a brand of sorts.
I think also another thing, the newest evolution of society and culture, kind of universally amongst the arts, is now a level of responsibility to be thoughtful and well informed, so that you can kind of positively, or at least accurately, represent yourself and positively influence people, beyond your music. But it should first self. I think musicians' first priority should be the art that they're working on, and not all the other things. But it is important to be careful about the rest of it too.
That seems to be a positive aspect, though. I mean, the fact that even if it's through social pressure, there is a pressure to be informed.
Yeah.
Which is always better.
Yeah, totally.
The more you can educate yourself is always healthier.
And it also inspires the music, like to bring it to your new album. Like, there is this, we'll love you more if you're thoughtful. So, like, how do you feel your new record shows that? Like, what does it say about your thoughtfulness, about your thoughts on the world?
I think at least these two EPs stemmed from a lot of personal experience. So we weren't writing with a broader scope. But in a way, the more specific you get with what you're saying, it seems to have more general appeal in the long term. At least we've always felt that we're more attached to things that are more specific in nature, because you tend to relate and maybe build connections that you wouldn't have if it's like a more generalized song or something. I don't know. I feel like that's what these songs were. And maybe we're stepping away from that as we attempt to evolve right now, doing demos for new songs and such. But that's an interesting thought that you just presented, that you have to.
Yeah, I think that this record was mostly, for the most part, a kind of more of an inward reflection, and I think that that's a lot of, at least lyrically speaking, a lot of lyrics that resonate most with me are typically inward facing, but I do think that we now aspire to kind of have a more outward perspective, or at least we're curious about what that looks like for us. But it's hard. It's really challenging. It's a hard way to kind of approach something, because it feels like it's easy to, at least for me, it's easy when I start writing that way. It's easy for me to feel like I'm writing from a place of looking down from above, and that is not a comfortable position for me.
And I can't say that, like, in listening to your music, there wasn't this like universal tapping into relationships. Like, what is love? What how do you make it work with somebody? Have your songs in some ways, I know this might be a weird question, but I am fascinated if whether when you write about love, when you write about relationships, when you write about your life, do you ever feel like you kind of get more clarity on how you're working it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How you're wording it?
How you're working through it. Like, Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's who I am in
Yeah.
relationships. I gotta fix that.
Yes.
100%. On most topics, really, it ends up being some sort of realization of, or a further realization of kind of where I'm at. And sometimes that comes way after the song's been, recorded, maybe even released. It's just been sitting there for a long time, and I'll kind of look at it, and something will make sense, will be more clear to me that wasn't clear about myself kind of at the time. I think they're helpful that way.
What I think what we both started doing was the first songs that we had written for these two EPs. We had maybe 3 apiece going into it that made it onto these recordings, and they were all about relationships, and they were sort of pushing the blame maybe onto the other person in the relationship. What was interesting was throughout the making of the album, and as we started to fill out the album, I know definitely on the songs that I wrote later, they began to realize, oh, maybe it's not just this one person that was the problem. I'm affecting the situation a lot. So the song started to revolve more around that sort of introspection, and it was an attempt to fix those aspects, or at least have an understanding of those,
Mm-hmm.
So it all of a sudden it went from like a relationship to me writing about my father on a song called Elaborate Attractions, to ending with the song called Lazy James, which was strictly about, a very introspective look on what my issues are and why they're that way. So that's pretty interesting that you asked that.
Interesting answer, because in a way what you're both saying, it's not just that you become more introspective, but you also become more accountable for yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's a good way to kind of take on a level of accountability, because what songs do when you're successful, and I think this actually happens from an audience standpoint or a listener. I have this experience. No matter what the subject matter is, a good song kind of glorifies the experience in a way that is easier to take account for, and I think I think movies do the same thing. I think film does the same thing, and you can kind of get a perspective on something that maybe you would feel too uncomfortable looking closely at, but because of it being presented in this kind of more romanticized way, it's a more comfortable experience.
Yeah, that's actually brilliant, because I kind of thought of that in a way that it kind of hold music and movies, they hold your hand to embrace a subject that otherwise, like, guilt is one of the hardest things to feel, or like just your own presence in a situation, and it kind of takes you out enough so that you can be like, yeah, this is my involvement in the world.
100%.
Yeah, you're a really great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. But you guys have like really smart, thoughtful answers. And I noticed you said something about movies, and I know you guys really do get inspired by films, and I'm curious, what are the movies that you're like, one day I'm going to make you a song? Like this is music and on film in a way.
Oh man. That is
Birdman is something we keep going back to.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I interrupt. We just love the way that's shot, and
I just like the way that whole thing's composed. Just overall. Yeah.
We like a little bit of humor too, so it just seems to fit that scope. In terms of,
there's a few.
You watch the Truman Show often.
I do. I don't know if I could ever. I wouldn't know how to approach that as a song. I do love that. That's one of those movies that anytime it's on, if it's on TV or if I see it on Netflix, I feel completely compelled to watch it in its entirety. For whatever reason. It's just one of those movies. There's a few movies that I think would make, we haven't really exercised much of a literal kind of like watch a film that really speaks to us and then try to write about the topic. I can't remember that when we've done that. We
I
should
just
though.
started trying to do that for a book, but
Uh-huh.
but Charlie Kaufman will be interesting because basically any of his premises on his screenplays are very meta. So the song didn't have to be like his idea for adaptation, the movie. It doesn't
Right.
actually have to be, the adaptation of the book or of the movie. It can just turn into its own thing.
Right.
Well, if you go by the films that you've like said and named, like The Truman Show and Birdman, which are both excellent films, they do have this theme of, ironically, of like isolated superheroes.
Totally.
People that are the leads that are just really abandoned in some ways and are kind
Mm-hmm.
of waking up to that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, those films do have a lot in common, and there's a number of other ones that I think we both really respond to that also have similar themes. And I wonder what it is when you reduce it that kind of what we're identifying with there.
The
But it
ego for us,
is, maybe it's just the kind of like yeah,
narcissism.
maybe it's all that.
Maybe you guys like feel like abandoned superheroes. You guys are both, you're lonely leading men in some ways, and you haven't. That's what you're tapping into with your music.
Oh
Yeah,
Christ, we got to start watching. Another one was The Passion of the Christ.
yeah.
It,
I
Very
really, that Jesus character, I really related to a lot of the things you went through.
exactly.
Totally about me. Yeah, yeah, definitely a good song to.
the book was better.
Gladiator, classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really, and then you could be like, I really relate to like the buffness of
Yeah,
Gladiator.
yeah. It's more of a just I see a physical resemblance.
Masculinity.
Yeah.
What was it that made you say, oh, going alone is not it? Like going together, this might be better. Like in terms of qualities you saw in each other, and just like the music you made with each other.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'd come from a background where I'd until kind of trying to do a solo project right before meeting Malcolm, I had only played kind of in bands as a member of 3, 4, 5 people. And it was very collaborative experience for me, kind of growing up that way, and I loved the team energy and collaborating with people, but I just felt frustrated because I felt that I was like overcompensating, you know, due to feeling like I couldn't fully express myself, and I was becoming a bad collaborator in those scenarios. So out of frustration, I was kind of just doing stuff on my own for a while. But then I met Malcolm, and I heard Malcolm's music, and I was kind of so compelled by both him and the work he was doing that I just felt like, you know what, if if I don't if I don't team up with this guy, then I'm going to be worried about him the whole time. This whole night he's in LA, we have the same friends, and he's brilliant. So I should just team up with him because I think he's the greatest, you know, artist that I've heard. Um, and so I kind of pitched
Damn.
it and think, well, I mean, that was at the time. I feel it's been
Yeah.
downhill, but
Changed. Your
um,
opinions definitely altered. We also have
yeah,
the same father, so that
yeah.
was,
That's a coincidence. Um,
Yeah.
no, yeah. Basically, I felt like I had to team up with him, otherwise I would be kind of competing. I didn't. He wasn't an enemy, a competitor. I felt I wanted to kind of like have. I don't even think Malcolm was thinking like that. But
yeah, absolutely it was. When we started, we met up and we immediately started writing together. We met through a mutual friend who set us up to collaborate in a different manner because Kane's an awesome musician, and he's like I know he's one of my, he's my favorite drummer. And I guess that was the instigator, was to get Kane to play with me live or to play on recordings. And then we started writing together and realized that we both had these areas that the other guy filled. Oh, this is sounding a little bit.
Yeah, there's innuendos. There's no escaping them.
But genuinely, I think it was just a complimentary thing, and we just liked each other a lot.
And,
so
and
it was just easy, man.
I think another part of the appeal that I actually haven't mentioned when we've talked about this before is because we met and started working with each other. We met basically on the premise of working with each other. There was no history. We had no history. We had no baggage, and it felt like a really good opportunity to kind of, for me, to take the lessons I've learned in being a collaborator with people I'd known for years, to take those lessons and start kind of fresh with someone, and nurture our working relationship as much as I would nurse the art previously. And that's worked really well for us so far. We've been really good. There's obviously our foundation is built on a lot of mutual respect artistically, and also we're pretty like similar. We would have been friends anyway. But yeah, it's been nice.
But
yeah, I'm forcing that on you. But it's been nice. It's been nice to kind of have a fresh start with somebody, and it's been a really healthy dynamic in that way. And it's easier to collaborate when it's just two people. I still do think it's a real challenge when groups of 4 or 5 people can make something work collaboratively. I'm very impressed. It takes a really patient group of people.
Well, it always in those circumstances, it always tends to be 1 or 2 people anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing
but then
decision making and the writing.
The dynamic between those two, leaders, and then their supportive family. Like me and Malcolm have just been watching The Last Dance, the Bulls documentary. And it's like the same kind of immense respect I have for people like Dennis Rodman and some of the other, key players on the team who weren't in a spotlight role. Yeah, well, Scotty was in a spotlight role. I consider him
the 1 and 2.
Yeah, those are 1 and 2. But those people who did their job and felt completely full doing it, and it was beautiful, and they're admired for it. But I think it's hard for people. It's impressive when people can do that. When people can openly be in support of a leader, and still, be completely full of pride in the work they're doing. I think that's a really impressive quality.
There's something that John Bryan said on an interview where he said, I think it's important. I'm paraphrasing, but he said this was on Sam Jones Off Camera podcast. He said, I think it's important to have a multitude of areas in your life. One where you're the dominant force, one where you're the subordinate force, one where you're on par with someone. I just think all those perspectives are important. So
maybe that's what's wrong with me.
What?
I never heard that quote, and
just the singular idea.
I don't think I have that balance. I need to find that balance.
Wrapping up the interview with like my final cue, I always ask, what is your favorite childhood memory with music?
Oh my God, I've got so many.
I've got one that just popped in my mind. I don't. This isn't a favorite one, but this is kind of ridiculous and dramatic. So I was in a boys choir when I was 12 or 11 or 12. I grew up Christian, very religious, in Birmingham, Alabama. So there's a lot to get into there, but that's for another time. And I was supposed to go to choir practice one day, and I just disliked it so much that my babysitter at the time was yelling at me to get in the car. And I said, okay, I'll be out there. She walked out to the car, and then I slammed the door and locked every door to the house so that she couldn't get in. And I ended up not going to choir practice that day.
Oh my God.
Because I locked my babysitter out of the house.
There you go, man. There you go.
That's
I
how
think
much.
you know where that's going.
Yeah, that's how much I disagreed with those views, I guess.
Well, you took a position there, buddy. I commend you. Yeah, I grew up from my dad and his dad and his granddad. They're all musicians. It's a long line of musicians. They were mostly guitar players, and I was a drummer. But I grew up, he kind of under his wing, and because he is a musician, he and I also have had like a kind of tumultuous relationship at times growing up. But there's been a number of times where we've been on a stage together, playing music together in different weird, situations. And the relationship that we have in those moments is very, very special to me. And I can remember them all very clearly and visibly. And those have been my favorite moments.
Aww.
My favorite moments.
That is sweet.
That's perfect. One is about like rebelling against God, and the other is like rebelling against your dad. But
it's very Freudian.
It's very interchangeable. Something about those damn male authority figures.
Oh man, they shape us all.
God damn it, Ed Harris.
We don't, and then you have the Truman Show and Birdman. It's like your top films. You guys are telling me something about male authorities and
don't date us is what we're telling you.
Well, that was perfect. That was my last question, and that was really great. And I thank you for the interview. You guys were so smart and so funny, and you're talented, and your music is actually good.
Thank you.
And it seems like you have a good pair together.
Yeah, we feel super lucky. But this has been an absolute pleasure and a standout interview for us. Obviously,
this is
new to this, but this is so thoughtful of you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
This was fun.
And